Good morning. Today is the first of our recaps from our series Living It Out. And we spent this last Sunday focused on the role of a citizen. Paul spends a lot of time really giving a good discussion of this in Romans chapter 13. And so that's where we spent most of our time in class. There's a couple of main principles that we find here. First of all, submission to the government is something for everyone. And the reason for that is because all authority is instituted by God. Remember, the authority in place at the time that Paul was writing this was, in fact, Nero, not exactly your best governor over the course of history. But it didn't matter because Paul recognized and pointed out that all authority comes from God. This is a common theme that we see in Scripture, not just in the New Testament, but in the Old Testament. Solomon wrote about it in Proverbs chapter 21. Paul, of course, writing about it here in Romans chapter 13, and again to Titus in Titus chapter 3. Peter wrote about it and understood it when he spoke in 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 13 and forward. And John records the words of Jesus as he spoke those same ideas to Pilate when he told Pilate that all authority comes from God. And so when we really have that right focus on who the authority comes from and who has instituted the authority, it makes it a lot easier for us to submit to authority in the governance, even if they're doing things that we may not be a big fan of, but aren't necessarily against God's law. Things, for example, like taxes. I don't like to pay taxes. But rightfully instituted and laid out taxes are things that we should follow. Paul points this out in the middle of Romans chapter 13. We don't, though, follow the governments blindly. Peter had this experience in Acts chapter 5 when he said we ought to obey God rather than man. And in that case, the government was telling him he's not allowed to preach. That, of course, is against God's law. And so we need to make sure that we have discernment in deciding whether or not it is the right thing to do for us to disobey the government from that perspective. Paul spends the rest of the chapter highlighting a couple other points on how we deal with those around us. And when we have this right attitude of submission, then it makes it easy for us to owe no man anything but to love one another. And he recaps several of the 10 Commandments in that section. But then he gives us a why. He gives us a reason why we submit to authority, even authority that doesn't sound like it's good authority, and why we treat others with love. And that is because Christ's return is imminent. And really our focus needs to be around doing the things that are Christ's work and not really focused on instituting some perfect government that should be in place here on this earth. That's never going to happen. But if we focus on Christ's work and we are prepared for his imminent return, then our actions will always be pointing towards God and giving glory to him.